Hey everybody, I wanted to take you through something I've been experimenting with, and that is printing articulated models on my resin printer. This is something that I think is typically suited for like a filament style FDM printer. Can it be done on a resin printer? Yes, but and the but is where things get interesting. So hang in there with me. I'll walk you through some of the considerations that you need to know. Some of the things you should be looking out for when wanting to print one of these articulated models, and what you should try to do. So I have here what you can see, of course, is this octopus. It's a very popular model on Thingiverse. I'm going to take us through two great examples, I think, that will help explain my point. This Flexi Facehugger, which is also on Thingiverse, and this articulated shark, which both of these will really help me demonstrate the difference in the models, which will be a success, which will be a failure, and why. So let me get those loaded up into Lychee, and we'll go from there. And I'll put these links in the description. Not that it matters. You can just search for these, but I'll try to help you out. So, okay, let me get rid of that. And let's throw the Facehugger model in here and also the shark. That shark model has a few different models included. I wanted the one that had the articulating jaw with it. So, and I believe I got the right one. Yes. Okay, cool. So, let's grab these and take a look. And if you remember your Lychee settings, you can use T, which is transform, to move this around. R is rotate. S is scale, if you want to do those things. Hotkeys, I'm a big fan of hotkeys. We're going to have to use those in order to demonstrate the point. Clearly, I have a Photon Mono X, and even if we rotate this, let's say, I don't know, 90 degrees. It's just still too large for the build plate, so we're going to have to scale this down. I'll do 50%, I guess, and that's where things start to potentially get interesting. So this guy will fit. I'll do this at 90 degrees too, but let's move these around. This will probably fit on the build plate, but for the purposes of explanation, do I want that big? Nah, I'll probably scale that down too. Let's make that like, oh, I don't know, 75% maybe. Okay, fine. Okay, so now that we've done that, we've got our two models here, and these will be two great examples of, and heck, we might as well just go ahead and print these out, even though I know one of these is highly likely to fail. Okay, so you want to print something articulated. What is articulated? It means it can bend. And we can go through some of these joint differences and see. Bendable models are pretty cool. They can get very complicated. For example, if you take a look at some of the models by Seven Fish, I mean, take a look at this thing. This is impressive. This is as somebody who has dabbled a bit in modeling, this is some really excellent bit of modeling here. So this is my stretch goal. I don't think this is going to be possible on a resin printer. This will really demonstrate kind of the limitations, I think, of resin printing. Now, resin printing, but also the type of resin I'm using, and I'll get into that in a minute. So, if you look at these two models, you say, what's the difference? There's some major differences. The difference here is in the joints or hinges of each of these. So if you take a look at this Facehugger model, there are some pretty tight tolerances in each of these. There's a very small opening here. You can see a little bit of daylight, and part of the challenge is with resin, of course, you've got a couple things going on. If you print it flat on the build plate like this, there's a couple of challenges. What happens is, of course, your first few layers are your burn-in layers, so you're going to expose these at a higher level. So you wouldn't want to print this flat on the build plate necessarily, just because you're gonna expose these more than the rest of the model, and these are, I would say, sort of critical elements of your hinge here, or joint. So you can see, right, you'll be exposing the heck out of this. So you'll want to pick these up, of course, off of the build surface. That's one thing to consider. The other thing is just the sheer space between these joints. And this is really what you need to look out for to have a successful model versus a fail. So with something like this that's got a lot of very tight tolerances here in between each of these joints, and when you zoom in, you're like, oh, that's plenty of space, but it really ends up not being plenty of space. I've actually tried to print this model a couple of times, and while I have no troubles printing other solid models, of course, you're going to get some frozen joints here, and why? I'll tell you why. Because in resin printing, you're printing this. Hold on, this will make a lot more sense if I just do this. You're printing this upside down, layer by layer. Your first layer is going to look like this. Your subsequent layers will build, and you can see here it starts off looking okay. But as this is dipping up and down and exposing in the resin, your resin is collecting in here in some cases. There may be a little bit of exposure kind of coming into this empty area, and as the model builds, it will end up freezing these joints solid. And you probably can get a couple of these to free up, but overall though, if you try to force some of these joints, you're inevitably going to crack one of these things and break your model. So I would say if you want to print this particular model with the joints like this and these pretty tight tolerances, what do? I would say try to print it maybe fairly large, scale it up, and print it large. That's not always what you want, right? You might want it this size, and I can understand that. Some other things you might be able to do, I'm using a standard Elegoo gray resin. If you want to try to print a model like this, you might want to try to print some resin that's going to accommodate potentially being bent a little more than this, and print the pieces individually if the model accommodates that, and then snap them together. Now, in something sort of really hard, kind of brittle, like an Elegoo standard gray, it won't really snap together well, and this particular model doesn't really support that because these joints sort of encircle one another, and so you can't just kind of snap them together like that. So I would say for this particular model, you're going to either have to print this pretty large to create enough space here where the resin can drain, where if there's a little bit of light bleeding or exposure, you're not going to freeze these joints solid. And potentially find a resin that is not quite so brittle where you can try to force these joints a little bit and kind of break them free and get them to move. But in my experience, this particular model, not very high level of success. I printed it, I think, 2 or 3 times, a couple of different ways. I tried doing some different things, and I was not able to get a successful print of this particular model. I'm going to print it for the purpose of this video. We'll do this together. So We'll see how this comes out. Now, moving on to this model, this I expect to be a success. Why? Couple of things. For one, these connection points or joints or hinges are pretty large, and you can see there's a lot of space here, which will permit two things. It'll let the resin drain as the model is building. It'll let it drain out a bit more, and it will make a nice kind of strong joint here, where if something is a little bit frozen, stuck, something, you should be able to kind of bend it, essentially break it free, and still have enough, of sturdy material here in order to complete an articulating model. This jaw, I'm skeptical if this jaw will actually articulate on us, just because of how it's modeled here. This jaw probably will be frozen solid. That's my expectation. Unfortunately, this will be cool if this moves. It's really weird because FDM prints in an entirely different way. This would likely be a success. This would likely be a success, but I haven't tried it myself. I do have an FDM printer coming, the Anycubic Viper. Really excited. I might retry these exact same two prints and see how they come out. In any event, we're not going to be able to print these flat on the build surface. These flippers here as well, I have a suspicion that these may have a little bit of extra exposure and resin kind of clogging up in them, and they may or may not be able to break free. So what do? We can do a couple things, actually. We can do a couple things. We can go back to our layout, take a look at these models, and let me just take a look at this in scale. I want to see how big this is. Okay, I think that'll be kind of a big shark, but all right, I dig it. I'm going to actually make this maybe a little bit larger to see if we can get it to be successful. Plus, I have room on the build plate, and since it's shorter than this, it's not going to matter time-wise anyway. So let's see if I can make this maybe... If I can make that a little larger and still get it to fit, I think we'll take our chances and print that too. Okay. And I'll move the shark over. I suppose I could always spin this around and make a little more space for myself, but I don't think we'll need to do that. So, all right, we've got both here. Oops, we've got both here fitting fine on the build plate. First thing we'll want to do, head over to our friendly supports, and I'm going to pick this up just a little bit. Of course, this is going to create a bunch of overhangs for us. So, let's throw some supports under here. It's probably not going to need a ton. I bet I could, I'm going to be lazy and just use some... I'm going to use some light supports. Yeah, I know. I'm going crazy. Will this stay? Let's find out. Sure. That's fine. There's no way I should have trusted this, actually. Looking at some of these, it's like, no, you definitely do not want supports like inside here. That is only going to exacerbate your problem, which is going to be collecting resin in and between these joints. So I'm just going to go through here and delete all this. I don't. That this will build fine. Actually, they're kind of, even when you tell it low density, sometimes it's a bit overzealous. I think all of this will build just fine. Will that be enough support under here? I don't know. When you are supporting, this is a great that's a great thing to call out, though. When you are supporting, you want to do a couple things. You want to make sure you don't have something like this, where you have supports in or on your joint pieces. That is only going to make your problem worse. Anything too close to the joint is not going to allow the joint to drain well. So you'll want to make sure you keep everything sort of away from this if you can. Get all this stuff out of here. This one's interesting because this tail is, these are all, I don't know, a hinge style joint. This one is more like a ball and socket. I expect this tail may be frozen in this position. We'll see if I can snap it free. Where these are light supports, I'm going to just add a couple more just because. Moving on to our other model here. Let's do the same thing. Let's lift it up, and I might as well throw some automatic supports. It'll just save me some clicking. Let's see what it comes up with. That is a tremendous amount of support. Let's just make sure there's nothing directly on or in our hinges like this. You want to get those out of there. That, right? You don't want anything that's making your problem worse, which is, you know, making more resin collect in these hinges and adding to some of the overexposure problems that you might have. And if you're really committed to printing a lot of these, you probably could get in and fine-tune some of your print settings and printer setups so that you can print these. It is doable, of course. It's going to take some real, I think, dedication to getting the settings right. And some joint types, I think, are just, you can have a real battle on your hands because of the way they're enclosed around other material. So let me get some of these things cleaned up, and then we'll prop down to the printer and try to get these started, and we'll see how far we get with this. Alright, let's see how we did. There's our shark and our facehugger. Let's see how they worked. This will just pop right off of here. But I can already tell this joint seems to frozen solid as predicted. And I know if you force these too much, it's just gonna break. So that's not good. But let's see how the shark did. Alright. Now look at what we got here. Now, as predicted, the jaw is not opening at all. It's solid. I might try to play with that with like an X-Acto knife or something, but it's just, the jaw line under here seems to be good, but all these other seams are solid. I might try to get in there with an X-Acto knife and see, but I'm impressed that these flippers are fine. And even, it looks like we might even get this back fin. The back fin, the back fin isn't going upright. It's more that there's enough slack in the rest, but there's a ball joint in here that does appear frozen. I'm going to clean this up a little bit, and but obviously much better experience with Mr. Shark here due to the types of joints here. Hopefully you can sort of see in there. Then Mr. Facehugger, which didn't really work, and you can try to force these, but they're just gonna snap. So, okay. So the articulated shark came out pretty good. There's an idea I had, though, to make it just a touch better, and so I'm gonna try this. we have it like this, and I thought about a couple things. Actually, I'll show you. So one of the interesting parts is the space in here, in these teeth, is so thin that it's sealed solid. So I have an idea. I'm going to open up this shark in Mesh Mixer. Two things I think I might want to change. Once we have our shark here in Mesh Mixer, and you can get Mesh Mixer for free. It's a decent program for editing models. Takes a little getting used to, but should be able to. Just move our buddy over here. Okay, so there's a couple of things I think I want to do. I'm going to actually raise this up off the build platform like this. And one of the cool things you can do in Mesh Mixer is separate shells. When you do that, actually I'm going to make this bigger so you can see all this. You have all the parts. If the model is made like this, you have all the parts separate. So, what am I going to do? I'm going to grab the jaw here, and I'm going to transform it. Transform in this case is really just sort of rotate, and I want to rotate it down. I'm going to rotate it down just a bit. And now I'm going to try to place it back in its spot if I can. Yeah, you can see the circles right there. I'm going to rotate it down and pop it in there. I probably could remove it and print it separately. I'm trying to decide. You know, you can do a couple things. I could remove this from the model completely, print it separately, and try to pop it back in. In my experience, resin does not take well to like flexing. At least this particular Elegoo standard gray, it's not really meant to flex. You could add a little bit of like a flexible type resin in, just to give it a little flex so that maybe you can gain some flexibility out of here. But what I really want to do is, if it's going to be frozen, I'd rather it be frozen sort of with the mouth open. One, it'll be easier to wash and cure the inside. So, oops, that's going to be tough to see. Okay. Yeah, I think that'll be okay. I think that'll be okay. That's in its spot on both sides, but it's open now and looks pretty good. And maybe, and just maybe, if it doesn't freeze solid here like this, I may be able to, with the jaw open, be able to wiggle it free, because now at least the teeth won't be all connected. The other thing I want to do is rotate this. And this is good if you're close to the handles here, you can move it in very small increments. If you come up to this dial, you can move it by 5s, and it snaps to 90 degrees, which is cool. Of course, now my tail is out again. If I thought the model could handle this, you could leave this separate. I don't think it can. So I'm going to try to put it back into its spot here. Select them all. And yeah. Pretty cool, right? So now we've got fin up, jaw open, and I guess it's naturally, let me just make sure it's the same scale as the one we printed before. Alright, I'm going to export this, and we'll see how it goes. Our shark is our face hugger. Let's see how the articulation goes. Oh man, that is really, really frozen solid. I'm pushing on that pretty hard. I'm feeling like the next amount of force is going to snap that. Well, at least I printed it with the mouth open. That'll make it easier to clean the resin out and stuff. But the rest of this printed quite nicely. All these, oh, you can't see because my damn hands are in the way. The little flippers and stuff, everything is articulating pretty well. It's pretty nice and loose. Everything else printed really well. This, I also think, is frozen solid. I'm not going to push my luck with it. Yeah, that's also frozen solid. Well, that's okay. It wasn't a total waste because at least I got it to have the mouth open and the tail up, which I liked.